I never expected a single object, something so small, so ordinary, to stop me the way it did that night. It was just past 11:47 p.m., the kind of hour where silence feels heavier, where every porch light in the neighborhood has already surrendered. Daniel Hayes, a man who had never believed in omens, stood frozen on the wooden steps of his small, rented house, staring at a baby shoe resting perfectly in the center of his porch, like someone had placed it there with intention. The shoe was tiny, soft blue, the kind a baby would only wear for a handful of months. It was too clean to have been lost by accident, too deliberate to ignore, and it sat there motionless, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The wind pushed softly against the old oak tree near the curb, brushing scattered leaves across the walkway. Daniel blinked twice, his chest tightening as he crouched down to pick it up. His hands were cracked and rough from the late shifts at the auto shop, but he touched the little shoe as if it were glass. Inside, tucked neatly against the fabric lining, was a folded note. His name, first and last, was written on the outside in a delicate, careful handwriting he didn't recognize. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. "Dad?" a small, sleepy voice murmured. "Why are you outside?" He turned, quickly hiding the shoe behind his leg as though it were contraband. His daughter Lily, 8 years old and wearing mismatched pajamas, rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand. Her curly hair stuck up in every direction, proof that she'd fallen asleep reading again. "It's nothing, sweetheart," he said softly. "Just thought I heard something." Lily tilted her head, like someone crying. "I thought I heard that." He felt a chill crawl up his spine. That detail she didn't need to know. He had heard something, a shuffle on the gravel, a sharp inhale, the sound of someone walking away quickly, but he'd assumed it was just a neighbor. The shoe in his hand said otherwise. "No," he answered, "probably the wind." Lily didn't look convinced, but she yawned and leaned against the doorframe. "I saved you some spaghetti, in case you were hungry." He smiled, a tired smile that held too much gratitude. "Thank you, Lil. Go back inside. I'll be right there." She disappeared slowly, glancing back twice, as if she sensed something important was about to happen. When the door shut behind her, Daniel unfolded the note with trembling fingers. "You don't know me, but you knew him." The sentence didn't make sense at first, and he read it 3 more times. A drop of something, not rain, not quite landed on the page, leaving a faint mark. He glanced at the street. No cars, no shadows, nothing. Just the cold and the silence. Daniel slipped the note into his jacket and the baby shoe into his pocket, forcing himself to walk back inside. The air inside the house felt warmer, safer, grounded by the soft glow of the kitchen light and the smell of reheated sauce. Lily sat at the small table, swinging her legs and waiting for him, even though he'd told her to sleep. "You look weird," she said. He let out a quiet laugh. "Thanks. That helps." "No, I mean, your face looks like when you're thinking too much." He sat across from her. "Just tired. You always say that." She pushed the plate toward him, and even though the spaghetti was lukewarm, he felt something in his chest ease at her kindness. But the shoe was still in his pocket, heavy in a way it shouldn't be. When Lily finally went to bed, he stood by her doorway for a moment, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. It grounded him, reminded him that, whatever the world tried to throw at him, he had a reason to stay steady. Downstairs, he placed the shoe on the kitchen counter, turned on the smaller lamp, and stared at it. Something about it felt familiar. Not the shoe itself, but the weight of it, the idea of it. The reminder of a past he didn't talk about. A past he'd buried in work, exhaustion, and the everyday necessities of survival. His phone buzzed, a text from his boss. "Of course. Daniel, we need to talk tomorrow. First thing." He exhaled sharply. Perfect. Exactly what he needed. Olivia Grant's strong, precise, intimidating without needing to raise her voice, had been on edge for weeks. Something about the new regional manager's visit, deadlines, pressure. She was already hard enough on him, and he couldn't afford to lose the job. Lily depended on it. Their whole life depended on it. He shut off the phone and opened the note again. "You don't know me, but you knew him." He whispered the words aloud. Him who? There was no signature, no explanation, just that sentence and the shoe. He looked again at the handwriting, delicate curves, gentle pressure, like someone who wrote slowly, intentionally, someone who didn't want to be misunderstood. The house groaned with the settling cold. He turned off the lights and went to bed, though sleep refused to come. His thoughts circled the same unanswered questions. Who would leave something like that? Why now? Why him? At some point, exhaustion dragged him under, and then the knocking started. It wasn't loud, more like someone tapping with the last bit of courage they had left. Slow, hesitant, not the kind of knock that meant danger, the kind that meant fear. Daniel sat up quickly, heart pounding. It was 2:06 a.m. His room was still dark. Lily was still asleep. He grabbed his jacket and went downstairs as quietly as possible. When he opened the door, no one was there. But something else was. A second baby shoe. And this time, the note wasn't tucked inside. It was pinned to the porch with a small silver hairclip, trembling in the wind as if it were breathing. His name wasn't written on this one. Only a single sentence. He should have been yours. Daniel felt the world tilt slightly. Who was he? Why did someone think a child belonged to him? He scanned the street, every shadow, every corner, searching for movement. But again, nothing. The air felt colder now, not empty, but expectant. He picked up the second shoe. It matched the first perfectly. Someone wasn't just trying to get his attention. Someone was telling him a story, one piece at a time. He closed the door, locked it, and leaned back against it with a long, shaky breath. His hands were trembling now, not from fear, from something deeper, something he didn't want to name yet. When morning finally came, Lily burst into the kitchen with her usual sunny chaos. Unaware of the mystery sitting quietly on the counter, Daniel moved quickly, pocketing the shoes before she could ask questions. At 7:32 a.m., he walked into the auto shop, still carrying the weight of the night inside him. The shop smelled of oil, metal, and a usual Monday fatigue. And standing in the doorway of her office was Olivia Grant, his boss, the woman who never showed emotion, who never wavered, who refused vulnerability like it was weakness. Except today. Today she looked like someone who hadn't slept, someone whose eyes had seen too much, someone who was holding back something she didn't know how to say. She opened her mouth to speak, but her eyes caught on his jacket pocket, where the outline of the two tiny shoes pressed against the fabric like a secret begging to be found. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice unsteady. "We need to talk." Daniel had never seen Olivia look like that. Not in 3 years. Not in all the mornings. She walked into the shop with her perfect posture, her sharp blazer, her clipped tone that could cut through metal. Today, though, something faltered behind her eyes, something quiet and terrified and unguarded. She motioned for him to follow, but she didn't walk with the same confident urgency he was used to. Instead, she moved slowly, as if every step took effort. Inside her office, she closed the door gently, as if loud sounds might break her. Daniel stood awkwardly near the chair, unsure if he should sit, wanting desperately to seem composed, even though his heart was hammering as loud as the shop's hydraulic press. "Look," she began, pressing her fingers against her temples. I know you didn't expect a conversation this early, and she stopped, exhaled, tried again. You're a good worker, Daniel. You've always been dedicated. You come in early, you stay late, you take every shift nobody else wants. And I've probably been tougher on you than I should have. Probably, he thought. That was an understatement. But he stayed quiet. Olivia walked around her desk, not sitting, just leaning on its edge like her legs didn't trust her. He'd never seen her hands tremble before. She clasped them to hide the shake. There's been a complaint, she said finally. His stomach dropped. About what? Not your work, she said quickly. It's not that. It's attendance. Some late arrivals. Early exits. Times when you had to leave suddenly because of your daughter. Daniel clenched his jaw. I always make up the hours. You know that. I do, she said. But the new district manager doesn't. So what does that mean? Olivia looked at him, and something in her expression softened, just by a fraction, but enough that he noticed. It means I've been asked to reduce staff. And your name came up. He felt the room tilt for the second time in 24 hours. No, he said under his breath. No, Olivia, I can't. My daughter, I know, she whispered, and it didn't sound like the voice of a boss. It sounded like the voice of someone breaking. I told them that. I fought it. But they want someone more reliable, someone with no distractions. Daniel swallowed hard, the reality hitting him like cold water. One paycheck, one. That was all it took to lose everything. The rent, the bills, the school lunches, the groceries timed perfectly down to the dollar. There was no backup plan, no savings, no cushion. I'll take extra shifts, he said quickly. You don't even have to pay overtime. It's not my call. His breath came out uneven. His mind flashed to Lily's smile that morning, her messy braid, the little lunchbox she'd decorated with stickers. He pictured the 2 baby shoes pressing against his jacket, like they were listening, like they knew exactly how fragile this moment was. Olivia, he whispered, please. Her lips parted, and for a moment he thought she would say she'd found a way around it. But she didn't. Instead, her voice cracked in a way he'd never heard. I'm sorry. They stood there in the kind of silence that only happens when someone's world has shifted. Then, very slowly, she handed him an envelope, his final paycheck, processed early, as if someone had already anticipated the outcome. Daniel looked at it without taking it. Every muscle in his body felt tight, hot, desperate. When do I go? She hesitated. Today. He let out a shaky laugh that wasn't really a laugh, more like disbelief in sound form. You couldn't have waited until the end of the week. I tried, she said. I tried everything. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. He just grabbed the envelope, shoved it into his pocket next to the baby shoes, and walked out of the office with his head down. The shop felt different now, like it wasn't his place anymore, like the walls knew he was no longer part of them. Outside, the air hit him with the full weight of morning, cold, sharp, real. He walked without direction, without purpose, just needing to move. He ended up behind the shop, near the old metal staircase where employees sometimes smoked during breaks. He braced a hand against the railing and closed his eyes. Dad? The voice shot through him like a reflex. Lily wasn't here, but the childlike softness of the voice in his memory made him open his eyes again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the first baby shoe, holding it up to the light. Something about it felt heavier today, as if it carried more than just fabric and stitching. He unfolded the first note again. You don't know me, but you knew him. Then the second, he should have been yours. He read the words over and over, each time feeling a deeper pull. A memory flickered, a mag long ago, a hospital hallway, a woman crying, a decision made too quickly. But it was fuzzy, incomplete, buried somewhere he didn't look anymore. He sank down, onto the curb, elbows on his knees, the two shoes resting in his open palms, like evidence of a truth he hadn't yet faced. Then a shadow stretched across him. "I didn't expect you to leave like that." He looked up and saw Olivia standing there, without her blazer, without her heels, without the armor she always wore. She looked human, scared, fragile. "What do you want?" he asked, not angry, just tired. "I wanted to make sure you were okay. Do I look okay?" "No," she whispered. "You look like someone who just had something taken away." "Yeah," he said, bitter laugh in his throat. "Welcome to my life." She stepped closer, too close for a boss, too close for someone who had just fired him. He tried to move, but she sat down beside him on the curb. "I didn't want to do it," she murmured. "Then why didn't you fight harder?" She blinked, hurt flashing across her face. "You think I don't know what this means for you? You think I haven't watched you walk in exhausted, but still smile at people? You think I don't notice how you pack meals for your daughter during your lunch break, or how you fix everyone else's problems before your own?" He stared at her, caught off guard. He'd never imagined she noticed anything about him beyond his work. "Olivia," he said, voice lower now, "I don't know what's happening in your life, but something's wrong. I can see it. So why does it feel like I'm the one paying for it?" Her breath hitched, not loud, barely audible, but enough to break the wall she'd been holding up. "My father is dying," she whispered. Daniel's shoulders softened. He wasn't expecting that. Not from her, not from the woman who always looked like nothing could touch her. "He was admitted last night," she continued, "and I didn't go. I was too scared. We haven't spoken in years." His chest tightened. "Why?" She shook her head slowly. "Because I always felt like I disappointed him. And now, it might be too late to fix it." Daniel closed his eyes. Suddenly, the distance between them didn't feel as wide as before. Pain had a strange way of revealing how human people were, even the ones who seemed untouchable. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy with unspoken truths. The two baby shoes lay in his hands, and her eyes drifted toward them. "What are those?" she asked. He hesitated. "I found them on my porch last night, and then again at 2 in the morning. Someone left notes." "What kind of notes?" He handed them to her. Watching her face as she read them was like watching someone solve a puzzle they wished didn't exist. "Daniel," she said, looking up slowly. "This handwriting. I've seen it before." His pulse quickened. "Where?" She traced the curves of the letters with her fingertip. "It looks like the way someone writes when they're trying not to shake. It looks emotional, afraid." "Olivia," he asked, voice thick, "who do you think wrote this?" Her answer was a whisper. "I think it's someone who wants you to know the truth about a child. One you were never told about." Daniel felt everything inside him still, like the world had stepped back and left him alone with the possibility that he wasn't just a father of one, but of two. For a long moment Daniel couldn't breathe. The two tiny shoes in his palms blurred, as if his vision couldn't decide whether to accept what Olivia had just said. A second child. A truth buried somewhere behind 8 exhausted years. Hospital hallways he hadn't walked down since the night Lily was born, and a memory he'd convinced himself didn't matter anymore. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That's impossible." Olivia didn't argue. She simply watched him with an expression that understood the gravity of disbelief. "I'm not saying it's certain," she said gently. "I'm saying someone believes it enough to leave these at your door." Daniel closed his eyes, as if shutting the world out would rearrange it back to something he understood. "I would have known," he murmured. "She would have told me." Olivia's voice was quiet. "Would she?" The question hit him in the chest like a punch. She. There was only one woman I could refer to. One woman he hadn't spoken to since the week everything fell apart. One woman who walked away without letting him finish a sentence. Rachel. He hadn't said her name aloud in years. He pressed his palms against his forehead. This doesn't make sense. Maybe not yet, Olivia replied. But someone is asking you to look. He let out a shaky breath and stood, pacing in a tight line on the cracked pavement. Why now? Why after all these years? Why in the middle of the night, like some ghosts trying to haunt me? Olivia stood too, her voice steady despite the tremor underneath it. People come forward when they're desperate, or when they're out of time. He stared at her, remembering her confession about her father, about the time she feared she was losing, and suddenly it didn't feel like she was talking only about him. Daniel looked down at the shoes again. If this is true, if this child exists. His throat tightened, the words refusing to form. I don't know how to handle that. Olivia stepped closer, not close enough to overwhelm him, but close enough that he felt anchored by her presence. You don't have to know today. He tried to laugh, but it came out broken. I just lost my job. I'm hanging on by threads. I'm barely keeping life together for Lily. I can't. He stopped, emotion tightening around his ribs. I can't take on another unknown. Her voice softened. No one can. But life doesn't always wait for us to be ready. He looked at her, really looked. The polished, unreachable boss he'd known for years wasn't standing in front of him anymore. This woman, without her armor, without the coldness, felt like a different person entirely. Someone who understood what fear did to people. Someone who recognized overwhelm in another's eyes because she carried it in her own. We should go somewhere quieter, she said. Talk this through. I need to pick up Lily soon. Then let me drive you. He hesitated. Sharing a car, being trapped in a small space with all this emotion felt too intimate, too exposed. But he didn't have the energy to argue, and something in Olivia's expression told him she needed the company as much as he did. Fine, he said gently, but this doesn't leave the car, or the curb, or whatever this moment is. I can't explain any of this to Lily yet. Of course, she agreed. They walked to her car in silence. She unlocked the door, but instead of getting in immediately, she hovered beside it, hands gripping the doorframe. Daniel, you should know something. He glanced at her, wary. What? I didn't fire you. His breath caught. What do you mean? You handed me the paycheck. I processed it because they forced me, but I'm appealing the decision. Appealing? He stared at her. Why would you do that for me? Olivia swallowed. Because you deserve better than what life keeps giving you, and because I'm tired of watching good people break while the rest of the world looks away. The honesty in her voice stunned him. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. And maybe that was okay. Maybe silence between two hurting people was more truthful than any polished sentence could ever be. They got into the car. The air inside smelled faintly of lavender and leather, clean and soft in a way that contrasted starkly with the grease and metal of the shop. Daniel watched her hands on the steering wheel, precise, elegant, but trembling ever so slightly. Is your father going to make it? He asked quietly. She let out a breath that wavered. I don't know. I've been too afraid to go. Why? 'Cause if he's as bad as they say, she said, voice cracking, then the last words he ever hears from me will be nothing. Silence. Daniel looked down. I know what silence does. I lived in it for years because someone chose it instead of the truth. Olivia's eyes flickered toward him. There was a silent acknowledgement there of the ways people hurt each other without meaning to, of the long shadows those choices cast. The drive to the school was quiet but not empty. It felt like a pause between storms. When they arrived, Lily was already waiting by the gate, backpack slung over one shoulder, holding a drawing she'd made in class. Daniel stepped out before Olivia could follow. "Dad," she shouted, running toward him. He knelt, catching her in a tight hug. Her warmth grounded him instantly. "Hey, Bug, you okay?" "Yep, we painted today, and I made this for you." She held up the drawing, a stick figure version of him, her, and a small house under a rainbow. He smiled. "It's perfect." Olivia watched from a respectful distance, something tender blooming in her expression. Lillian noticed her and tilted her head. "Dad, that's your boss." Daniel swallowed, bracing himself. "She gave me a ride." Lily walked up to her without hesitation, childlike bravery in every step. "Hi, I'm Lily. My dad says you're very serious." "Lily," Daniel hissed, embarrassed. But Olivia did something he'd never seen before. She laughed. A soft, quiet laugh that surprised even her. "Well," she said, kneeling to Lily's height, "your dad isn't wrong. I can be serious, but I'm trying to be less scary." "You're not scary," Lily replied, with the earnest honesty only children have. "Just tired." Olivia froze. Daniel felt his breath catch. Lily continued, "My dad looks like that too sometimes, but I make him spaghetti." Olivia blinked hard. "I appreciate that." Daniel watched her, something shifting inside him. A subtle change, not romantic, not yet, something gentler. An understanding forming between two people who had finally stepped out from behind their walls. They drove Daniel and Lily home. When they stopped in front of the house, Daniel's stomach twisted instantly. A piece of paper was tucked beneath the welcome mat. He hadn't left it there. He looked at Olivia. "Stay," he murmured. "Please." He stepped out, lifted the mat with trembling fingers. Another note. No baby shoe this time. Just a message. "If you want the truth, meet me tomorrow. 9 p.m. The old bridge." Olivia read it over his shoulder. "That handwriting," she whispered. "I'm telling you, Daniel, this person is terrified. Or desperate." His heart pounded again. No signature, no instructions. Just the promise of a truth that could shatter everything. And suddenly, the night ahead felt darker than any he'd walked through in years. Daniel stood on the porch, staring at the note as if it might disappear if he blinked. The words were shaky, uneven, hurried, written by someone wrestling with their own fear. "Tomorrow, 9 p.m., the old bridge." A meeting place from a past life, from memories he had packed away like old photographs he'd convinced himself he no longer needed. Olivia hovered behind him, quieter now, as if her presence alone kept the moment from collapsing under its own weight. "You don't have to go," she said softly. "Whoever this is, they're pulling you into something heavy." Daniel closed his hand around the note, feeling its edges press into his skin. "I need answers. I can't ignore this. What will you tell Lily?" He didn't have an answer. He wished he did. He wished he had something resembling a plan, some structure to justify the unraveling of his life. But all he had were 2 baby shoes, 2 notes, a job he no longer had, and a truth he could feel breathing down his neck. "I'll figure it out," he said. Olivia studied him for a beat, long enough to feel like an entire conversation. "If you're going to that bridge, I'm going with you." He shook his head. "This isn't your problem. Neither was firing you," she whispered. "But it still became my responsibility." Something in her voice made him look at her, really look. She wasn't offering out of guilt anymore. Something deeper had pulled her in. A connection built out of fragility, shared fear, unspoken humanity. He didn't know how to name it yet. He only knew he didn't want her to walk away. "Okay," he said. "Stay, please." She nodded. That night, after Olivia left and Lily drifted to sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit, Daniel sat at the kitchen table under the glow of a single lamp. The baby shoes lay between his forearms like twin ghosts. He traced the stitching, trying to summon memories that refused to surface. He remembered Rachel's laugh, the way she used to paint her nails only halfway before getting distracted by life. He remembered how fast she walked when she was nervous. He remembered how she left quietly, abruptly, like a light suddenly switched off instead of dimmed. But a child? A son? No. He would have known. He would have felt it, wouldn't he? The truth hovered just out of reach, taunting him. The night passed in slow waves of restlessness. The next day was long, a blur of managing Lily's routine, preparing instant meals, answering her bright questions with half-hearted smiles. He didn't tell her about the notes. He didn't tell her he'd lost his job. He didn't tell her that, inside him, a storm had started and he wasn't sure how to protect her from the lightning. By late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and stretched long shadows across the living room, a knock sounded on the door. Gentle, familiar. Olivia. She stood there in a grey sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back, her face carrying the exhaustion she tried to hide. "I got your message," she said. "I can take you." Daniel hesitated. "I should go alone." She stepped closer, voice firm. "No, you shouldn't." Lily poked her head from behind the couch. "Are you coming to dinner?" Olivia knelt, forcing a smile. "Not tonight, sweetheart, but I'll see you soon, okay?" "Okay." Lily didn't question it. She was used to adults with complicated schedules. "I'll be drawing in my room." Daniel ruffled her hair before she skipped away. He grabbed his jacket, the two shoes tucked carefully into the inner pocket, and joined Olivia outside. They drove in quiet anticipation. The old bridge waited on the outskirts of town, stretching over a narrow river that reflected the sky like a mirror. It had once been a gathering place for teenagers, lovers, and dreamers who wanted the world to feel big again. Tonight it felt small, isolated, heavy with memory. When they arrived, the moon was rising thin, sharp, a blade of white light cutting through the dark. "Stay in the car," Daniel said. Olivia shook her head. "Not a chance." He sighed, but said nothing. Together, they stepped onto the wooden planks of the bridge, their footsteps echoing in soft, uneven rhythms. The wind swept through the surrounding trees with a shiver that felt almost like warning. At first they saw nothing. Then, a figure stepped out from the shadows at the far end of the bridge, small, thin, holding something to her chest. Daniel froze. Olivia's hand hovered near his arm, steadying him without touching. The woman took a step forward. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Rachel. She looked smaller than he remembered, frail, almost translucent in the moonlight. Her eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights, of secrets carried too long. She clutched a folded blanket in trembling arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words cracked something inside him. "You left," he said, voice barely audible. "You disappeared. I know. You didn't give me a chance. I know. Did you have a son?" His voice broke on the last word. "Rachel, did you hide a child from me?" She flinched. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "No, not the way you think." Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. "Then why the shoes? Why the notes?" Rachel held the blanket tighter. "Because I need to tell you something before it destroys me." Olivia stayed close, but silent, a living anchor at Daniel's side. Rachel took another step closer. 8 years ago. I was pregnant, but I was scared. I didn't know if it was a good idea. I didn't know if we were strong enough. And then everything got worse, and I panicked. Daniel swallowed painfully. "Rachel, I thought I'd ruin your life," she whispered. "So I left. I thought I was doing the right thing." His voice rose. "But the child, I lost him," she said, collapsing to her knees. 2 days after I left, a miscarriage. I didn't tell you. I couldn't. I thought you'd hate me." The world stilled. The cold, the wind, the moonlight, all faded. Only her words remained. Daniel lowered himself slowly, the breath leaving his body in one long exhale. Grief he never knew he carried flooded him, sudden and overwhelming, a tidal wave crashing into memories that were never allowed to exist. The baby shoes, the notes, they weren't warnings, they were confessions. Rachel lifted the blanket with trembling fingers. Inside it was a small box. She opened it and revealed the matching shoes. "I kept them," she said, "for 8 years. I couldn't throw them away. I couldn't look at them either. I'm sorry for the way I told you. I'm sorry for everything." Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. Not anger, not even betrayal, just ache. An ache for a life that could have been. An ache for a child who never existed long enough to be held. An ache for the woman kneeling in front of him, broken by guilt she didn't know how to carry alone. He reached out slowly, not to pull her close, not yet, but to place his hand on the baby shoes between them. "I wish you'd told me sooner," he said softly. "I know. I would have helped you, I know. But, Rachel?" She looked up, eyes swollen and pleading. "You're right. We weren't strong back then." Olivia turned away, giving them a small piece of privacy. Her breath trembled, as if she too felt the wound being exposed. Daniel inhaled deeply. "But I'm stronger now, and you don't have to carry this alone anymore." Rachel sobbed, the kind of sob that comes from a place deeper than pain, somewhere near release. Daniel didn't pull her into his arms, but he didn't walk away either. He simply sat there with her, letting the truth settle like dust after a storm. After a long while, Olivia stepped closer again. "Daniel?" she murmured gently. "We should go." He nodded. Rachel wiped her face. "Thank you for coming." He looked at her, really looked, and felt something shift inside. Not love, not reconciliation, just forgiveness. He stood and turned toward Olivia. She held his gaze with a softness he hadn't expected. As they walked back to the car, Daniel felt the baby shoes in his pocket, 2 tiny symbols of a life that never was, but also of a truth that finally had room to breathe. When they drove away from the bridge, Olivia placed her hand over his for just a second, light, grounding, real. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "I hope so." "You did." The road stretched ahead, long and quiet. Not a road back, a road forward. For the first time in years, Daniel felt the weight on his chest loosen. Not vanish, just loosen. Enough to breathe again. Enough to imagine a different kind of life. Enough to imagine that maybe, somehow, healing wasn't out of reach. And as the bridge faded behind them, the 2 baby shoes slipped together in his pocket. No longer symbols of what he'd lost, but of what he was finally ready to face.